Owen Kelly from Scottish Financial Enterprise. Well, I put some of those concerns on currency to the First Minister Alex Salmond when I sat down with him at his official residence in Edinburgh.
What we're putting forward is supported overwhelmingly in the borders, in the rest of Scotland and in England. So it's an overwhelming majority in Scotland and in England.
But is it the right policy?
Well, it is the right policy because, listen, sterling is as much our currency as it is London's currency. It was actually a Scot that invented the Bank of England, incidentally. But even if we go more recently, that is our currency as well. It doesn't belong to George Osborne, and therefore we're entitled to have it. And the reasons why we'll have it are twofold. One is it's overwhelmingly in the interests of England and Scotland because of the close trading bonds that we have to have the same currency. And secondly, of course, if London were to take the position that they have got the right to the assets of the United Kingdom, all of the assets, the currency and the monetary assets, then they end up stuck with all of the liabilities, and that's the voluminous national debt that Alistair Darling and now George Osborne has built up. And there's no way they're going to get themselves into that position.
So that's your negotiating position, is it? You say...
It's not a negotiating position, Peter, it's an absolute fact. I mean, if you try and claim all the assets, and of course they've never actually said this, they just suggest it strongly, but if they tried to claim all the assets, they get stuck with all the liabilities. And they're not going to put themselves into that position because they would, that would be 100 billion or so. And I'm afraid they're not going to give us that opportunities. But that is the reality, and therefore that is the right way to look at these things. So it's overwhelming the interests of Scotland and England, Scottish business, English business. They need Scotland's exports and oil and gas and whisky and our trade in order to sustain sterling. And you cannot claim all of the assets of the country without accepting all the liabilities, and they will not get themselves into that position. That's why in the White Paper, of course, we put forward a formula which had an equitable division of both assets and liabilities in the kind of responsible way you would expect from the Scottish Government.
The reason why I asked the question was that, you're very fond of citing the Fiscal Commission, that you set up their Nobel laureate winning economists on that commission. But actually, if you look, as I have done at the annex to their first report, they actually say you could have greater powers to do more in Scotland if Scotland had its own currency. Wouldn't you prefer to have those powers?
Well, the recommendation, you're right to point to the Fiscal Commission report, and there are two Nobel laureates in the Commission. Now, this is a high-powered stuff, and they said their recommendation was the best policy for Scotland and for England was to share the currency, which is our currency as well as London's currency. That was the best. They said, of course, Scotland could do other things, but that was the best policy. Why shouldn't I put forward the best policy
they say,
as opposed to another policy?
Don't mind me quoting, establishing an independent currency would allow the greatest policy activism and discretion for Scotland. Isn't that what you want to do? You want to do more with an independent Scotland.
Indeed, but they also said the best policy, the balance of advantage was in sharing a currency. The balance of advantages is because there would be transaction costs for people in Scotland and for people in England if you didn't share the same currency. And therefore, having established the currency, then that is the best position, the one that they advocated in the Fiscal Commission, and therefore we should put forward the best policy. Of course, just because you share the same currency doesn't mean that you don't control fiscal policy, taxation, spending. And there's all sorts of things you can do which are really important for the economy and for social life in Scotland. For example, a transformation in childcare, the first steps to which we've managed to take under devolution, but to have a transformation, you have to have independence. Why? Because if you bring 100,000 women into the workforce by releasing them from the childcare obligations in the school term, if you allow people to work, then the revenues that come in from income tax, from VAT, from all the other taxes, currently go to London, would go to the Scottish Exchequer under independence and allow us to finance that very radical and progressive policy. That's a good example of the freedom you have with independence that you don't have under devolution.
And next week we'll be talking to Scottish Labour leader Joanne Lamont.